everybody, my name is Mars. You can call me MG if you would like, and today I have for you my February reading wrap up. Honestly, this might be my best reading month probably ever in terms of ratings. I had so many books that I gave a 10 out of 10 stars. Like, amazing books this month. Absolutely amazing. Not all of them, I will say. There are a few that didn't hit. We'll get there. But overall, I just am so happy with the books that I've read this month. So let's talk about them. So we started off with a big hit, and that was Dreams Lie Beneath by Rebecca Ross. I actually read 4 Rebecca Ross books all in a row, and I vlogged it, so I will link that vlog down below for you guys to check out if you haven't already. But Dreams Lie Beneath, 10 out of 10, absolutely fantastic book. It was everything I wanted out of this book. From the premise, it delivered. It delivered so well. I actually read this physically as a library book, but had to return said library book. I did that a lot this month. This was the first month where I had physical library books, and I don't have any of them to hold up for you because they've since been returned. So I will just put the cover up the way I do when I read ebooks. But yeah, 10 out of 10. This was a buddy read with Madison, Zainab, and Jess, and I kind of zoomed way ahead on accident. I channeled my inner middle schooler and read the entire book in one day. 477 pages in one day. Who am I? Like, oh my gosh. It was just so good, I could not put it down. So I ignored all of the other things I should have been doing and read it all. And you know what? I don't regret it. It was so good. Next up, I read The Queen's Resistance, and this one was good. Not nearly as good as Dreams Lie Beneath, but it was better than the first book in the duology. So the first book is The Queen's Rising, and that book I always describe as that one Bob's Burgers clip where the character is like, if Jessica were a spice, she'd be flour. That's what this book is. If this book, well, the first book in the duology was a spice it'd be flour, it's fine. It does what it's supposed to do. It was just kind of really bland. Things really ramped up in the second book, and I enjoyed it a lot more than the first one, but I still didn't absolutely love it. I just had a really good time with it. Then I picked up A Fire Endless, and this is the sequel to A River Enchanted, and it was so good. I would say this was on par with the first book in the duology. I really enjoy how it all wrapped up. I felt like it was a satisfying conclusion to the duology. I just I don't connect with Rebecca Ross's adult stuff as much as I do her young adult because like Dreams Lie Beneath and the book I'm about to talk to you afterwards, those are technically young adult, although I would consider them personally new adult because of some of like the themes and stuff, but new adult still isn't a widely recognized category. So like they're technically young adult and her stuff that's technically young adult is the stuff that I enjoy more than her adult stuff. That's a whole lot of babbling on about something that doesn't really matter, but yeah, Fire Endless was really, really good, but again, not something that absolutely blew me away. But then we have a book that did absolutely blow me away, and that was Ruthless Vows, the sequel to Divine Rivals, and I gave this a 10 out of 10. I was so scared going into this because I thought that it wouldn't live up to Divine Rivals. Like, I was so scared because Divine Rivals was my favorite book of 2024. Out of every single book I read in 2024, Divine Rivals was my favorite, and so I was so scared going into the sequel. I was like, what if it's just not as good? What if it falls flat? But it didn't. There's one teeny tiny complaint that I have where there's a character that I wish showed up a little bit more throughout the book, but other than that, zero complaints, 10 out of 10, absolutely flawless. I was sobbing. Genuinely, tears streaming down my face while reading this. So, uh, overall, a fantastic book. If you want to know more of my thoughts on these 4 Rebecca Ross books, again, the link is in the description for you to check out that vlog and you can get kind of a little play-by-play of me reading them. And then I picked up The Merchant of Venice, and this was okay. It's not my least favorite Shakespeare, but it's definitely not my favorite. It was quite anti-Semitic, which is the thing that people know about it going into it, so I wasn't surprised. But yeah, there were some moments that I thought were really fun, but overall not great. I will stick to my favorite Shakespeare's for ones that I'm going to reread. I don't think I'm going to revisit this one. After that, I picked up How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis, and this is a self-help book, kind of just about cultivating your personal environment, and it's especially geared towards people who are neurodivergent or dealing with mental health issues and things of that nature. And I thought this was extremely helpful. I read it as an ebook, but I would like to get a physical copy to own and reread and annotate. I gave this a 10 out of 10. It was so good, and I'm not usually a self help kind of person. Like, that's not my genre that I like to read, but this one was definitely something that I would love to revisit because, as someone who is neurodivergent and also struggles with mental health outside of that, I sometimes struggle with things that this book definitely had some helpful information about. One thing in particular that really stood out to me was the line about, like, not everything has to be clean at the same time, or something like that. Like, it's fine if there's dirty dishes in your sink because you vacuumed the living room today, and things of that nature. Like, that really hit. I'm like, wow, I've never considered that perspective before. So, yeah, 10 out of 10, absolutely amazing. I'm so glad that I picked it up. Then I read Psyche and Eros by Luna McNamara, and this was the Bujo Buddies book club pick, and it was good. I didn't love it. I learned from this reading experience that I prefer myth retellings to be like original stories that kind of like draw on elements of the myth rather than the story being the myth, if that makes sense. Like, this story literally follows Psyche and Eros, and I prefer retellings that are their own thing that would pull inspiration from the myth. If that makes sense, I hope it does. But yeah, it wasn't a bad book. I did have a fun time reading it, and it was very fast paced, which I appreciate, but it just wasn't totally my thing. Then I picked up My Throat an Open Grave by Tori Bovalino, which I had never heard of before, but the Libby app allows you to sort books by available now, and I was like, I want something horror. And so I went to available now, and I went to the horror section, and this was there, and I'm like, that sounds really good. And it was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. I do have some nitpicky things about it that weren't quite there for me, but overall, I thought it was very well done. And this is a very strong comp title for my own project Salvation that I'm currently working on the second draft of. So it definitely helped me there, like, get more in the mood to work on my own story. So that was a nice little bonus there. Then we have three books that I read for another vlog that I will, of course, link down in the description, and that was my RF Kuang taste test vlog. So I picked up three of her books, and it was a good time. I definitely had differing opinions on the differing books, so let's just talk about them all. First up was Yellowface, which I was very hesitant to go into because I knew it was not a genre that I typically enjoy. It is a contemporary litfic kind of story, but it's also satire, and those just aren't my vibe. And I did enjoy this book. I enjoyed the writing more than the actual story, which makes sense having now read more R.F. Kuang books. I really like her writing style, but Yellowface just wasn't really the book for me because it's not a genre that I typically pick up and enjoy, but I still do see the merits of it. Like, I understand why it is so popular. It just isn't my personal taste. Then I picked up The Poppy War, and this surprised me. I went into this expecting it to be like super heavy grimdark, and it does have grimdark elements to it, but it's also not as dark as I thought it would be. I assume we will get to that further on in the series because there are two more books in this trilogy. There was a humor to this that I really didn't expect, and that really shocked me, took me by surprise. So, that was fun. I really enjoyed the character work in this. I feel like the characters are where this shines. The story itself is good, like the plot and everything and the world building, but the characters were the shining moment for me, which is great because I'm a character-driven reader, so I will 100% be continuing on with this series. And then I read Babel, and this was a buddy read with Brie from the channel Brie Bonomo, and this was really good. It didn't quite live up to the hype I had built up in my head for it, which is a little bit disappointing, but like, That's on me. I'm the one who built up the hype. And I still really enjoyed it. The language magic was so fascinating. Just personally, for my tastes, the pacing was not it. The first 300 pages are very like slow, vibey type of writing, and then the last 200 pages are extremely action packed. And I loved both parts. They just didn't quite gel together for me. So, um, overall, I really enjoyed it, but it didn't quite hit the way I wanted it to. But R.F. Kuang has a different Dark Academia book coming out this year. I think it's called Catabasis? Is that? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it is another fantasy Dark Academia where two grad students journey into hell to save the life of their professor and they like fall in love along the way or something like that. And like it just sounds way more up my alley. Like this sounded up my alley, but I see now why certain elements didn't work for me. I'm hoping that Catabasis is what I wanted Babel to be. So stay tuned in the future for me to read that book and hopefully absolutely adore it. After that, we had my lone DNF of the month, and that was A River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy. And this was going to be a reread. I did read this a few years ago. I genuinely don't remember when, but I remember it being good but not great. This time around, I got like 70 something pages in, I think. Like, I gave it a fair shot, it just wasn't doing anything for me. I didn't care about the characters or the magic or the world building or the plot. And like, if I'm not caring about something, I'm not gonna want to pick it back up. So I literally put it down and then it's just like, well, I don't really want to pick it up and continue reading, so I'm not going to. So unfortunately, this is a DNF. I will not be reading the sequel because that was the main point of me reading this was to finally move on to the sequel. It is only a duology, but like it just wasn't for me, and hopefully someone else will get more enjoyment out of this book than I did. Then we had a book that completely shook me, and that was Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book in the Wax and Wane series, which is the second era of Mistborn. And you guys, I was completely floored reading this. Like, I knew I was gonna love it. Alloy of Law was one of my favorite books last year. Like, I loved it. Something about this one just really hit me, and like the surprises, the twists, like, oh my god. Brandon Sanderson does this thing where I describe it as there's a book twist and then there's a series twist. So I'm like losing my words. I'm so excited to speak about this. So there'll be towards the like 75 to 80% mark, there will be one twist that affects what you thought about this one particular book, and then there'll be a second twist that affects what you think about the entire series. And the book twist in this, I didn't see coming, but I could have. Like, thinking back on it, I'm like, oh, I see like the little plot threads leading to that. But then the series twist just like I was shocked. Like, I was absolutely floored. And not for the last time this month. The books we'll talk about afterwards also got me in this kind of way. But, like, this was so amazing that I literally almost ignored the rest of my TBR to go and pick up the third book in the series because they had a copy available at my library. But I exercised restraint and I did not pick it up immediately. I did get it from the library. It is sitting right there on my TBR cart and it will be the first book that I pick up in March. Like, you guys, I am so excited for the Bands of Mourning. You have no idea. But yeah, 10 out of 10. Shadows of Self was so good. And then the last two books were also both 10 out of 10, and I'm going to talk about them together because they are Iron Widow and Heavenly Tyrant by Shirin J. Zhao. I literally finished Heavenly Tyrant like 20 minutes before I sat down to film this video, so it is still fresh in my mind. Iron Widow, this was a reread. I read this like 3 years ago, maybe, and because Heavenly Tyrant finally came out, I wanted to reread it and refresh myself, and it was just as amazing as the first time I read it. Like 10 out of 10, amazing, obsessed. I could not be more invested in the series. Heavenly Tyrant, oh my god, I was like flabbergasted. Chapter 33, that's all I'm gonna say. I got to chapter 33, well, the end of chapter 33, and jaw on the floor. I had to stand up and like pace around my apartment and then just stare at the wall to recuperate. to recover from that. And then everything after chapter 33 just kept hitting again and again and again. I need the third book because this is going to be a trilogy. It was originally supposed to be a duology, but I guess all of the stuff that Sheeran wanted in the second book didn't quite fit into Heavenly Tyrant, so it does say to be continued, and like, big cliffhanger at the end. I really hope we don't have to wait several years for the next book the way we had to wait between Iron Widow and Heavenly Tyrant, but I also understand that it takes time to craft a book, and like every step of the way takes time. So if we do have to wait a couple of years, I understand, but also I'm like, I need it. I need to know what happens. I need to know how it all plays out. Like, genuinely, I'm so shook. Like, I'm going to take the rest of the day to recover from this and not pick up the Bands of Mourning until I'm like well and truly ready to move on from Heavenly Tyrant. But, oh, wild. Absolutely wild reading month, you guys. So those are all of the books that I picked up in February. Let me know what you guys read. Was there a standout favorite book, or was your month more like me where there were so many books that you loved that you couldn't really pick between them? Genuinely, I don't know what I would consider to be my favorite of this bunch because there were so many that I loved and adored and will revisit. Oh, I'm so happy. I've just had a great reading month, but we have now come to the end of this video. If you've enjoyed it, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel for more content, and that way I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.